Hello and welcome to a whole new episode of your program Africa Today. This is Wagih and I'll accompany you through the latest development in the African Horn. Starting off with Egypt, where President Sisi received head of the African Bank for Exports and Imports, African Bank, Dr. Bendiket Orama, whose mandate ends next month, and the upcoming president of the bank, Dr. George Elombi, in Cairo on Sunday. The meeting was attended by Governor of Egypt's National Bank, Hassan, and presidential spokesman Ambassador Mohammed Shinawi said that during the meeting, Sisi hailed efforts by Orama is boosting and diversifying intra-African trade as well as increasing Africa's share in international trade. He said that during the meeting, Orama reviewed the most significant achievements during his 10-year tenure, atop of which the launch of the African Continental Free Trade Area. For his part, Olembi reviewed his vision and plans to develop the bank and boost its role in Africa. And to shed more light on this topic, I'm so delighted to be accompanied over the telephone by Dr. Hassan Wagih, the Professor of International Law. Good evening.
Good evening.
Well, Doctor, of course, this is also one of the recent steps for President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi of expanding more trade in the African Horn and with the African brothers. But how do you see this timing of the visit by the African Bank outgoing and upcoming president to Egypt?
Oh yes, this is expresses the continued effort by the president to make Africa his main concern, and actually this is an important role Egypt is playing in cementing its relation with all African institutions. And the African Bank is very important for everyone in the continent and should be supported, and strategic relations should be established with them.
Well, Doctor, how would you describe cooperation between Egypt and the African Bank?
Yes, of course, as I said, the important is there is a joint agenda, the agenda of the bank and the agenda of Egypt in terms of its economy, in terms of enlarging the share of the international commerce between African states and the entire world. So, and even the internal side of Africa. We have to enhance the cooperation with all African countries and increase that kind of thing, and the bank could play a very important role in such a great effort.
Well, of course, all those cooperation, all those initiatives, and the planning for the future with the African Horn, lots of agreements and memorandums were agreed on before with our brothers of the African continent.
Oh yes, we have to enhance and cement our relationship with all African countries, and of course all African institutions. All African institutions need a strategic relationship, and we need support, mutual support should be there, because the agenda of the entire world commerce and the entire crisis needs this kind of strategic relationship with our African brothers in all aspects.
Well, we need to create our country and government represented in His Excellency President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, of course, for moving towards a better future, not just in Egypt, but also in the African Horn.
Right.
Well, Doctor, I would like to thank you so much for your time. That was so informative. And ladies and gentlemen, we are moving now to another issue, African topics on the agenda of the UN General Assembly meetings in New York, where Cairo reiterated rejection of unilateral measures in the Eastern Nile Basin in reference to Ethiopia's disputed ground Ethiopian Renaissance Dame Great.
Egyptian Foreign Minister Badr Abdulati, with several members of the Egyptian delegation to the UN, met with Cho Hyong-hyun, Minister of Foreign Affairs of South Korea and current President of the United Nations Security Council UNSC in New York. Speaking with Cho Hyun-hyun, South Korea's foreign minister and current president of the UN Security Council, Abdulati said Egypt would take all necessary measures consistent with international law to safeguard its water security, calling the Nile an existential issue for the country. Ethiopia has proceeded with filling and operating the GERD on the Blue Nile despite not having an agreement with downstream states. The move violates international law and threatens their water security. Cairo, which relies on the Nile for nearly 98% of its needs, has spent more than a decade in fruitless negotiations to secure a binding deal on the dam's filling and operation. The Blue Nile contributes about 85% of the 55 billion cubic meters of water Egypt receives annually. Earlier this month, Ethiopia marked the formal inauguration of the GERD despite continued opposition from Cairo and Khartoum. In a letter to the Security Council in early September, Egypt described the dam as a unilateral venture that undermines regional stability. Abdulati also addressed regional crises during his meeting with Cho, praising South Korea's recent positions on the Israeli wars on Gaza and Lebanon. He condemned the Israeli military assault in Gaza, stressing Egypt's complete rejection of any state action above the law, and reaffirmed Cairo's opposition to the displacement of Palestinians and support for the establishment of an independent Palestinian state in accordance with international frameworks. He urged the Security Council to enforce an immediate ceasefire in Gaza and ensure the delivery of humanitarian aid. Since the outbreak of the Israeli genocidal war on Gaza in October 2023, the Israeli occupation army has killed at least 65,900 Palestinians and injured over 167,518 others. The United Nations documented 1,854 killings, 1,693 injuries, 423 abductions, and 169 cases of sexual violence from January to September in South Sudan, a 59% jump from last year, adding that the limited access means the real toll is likely higher.
Well, we're still following up with this episode again with Dr. Hassan Wagih, the Professor of Political Science. Dr. Wagih, how did you see the meetings of the UN General Assembly with regards to files related to Africa?
Yes, that was a very important meeting. You know, when you are in the Security Council, there is veto power. We cannot imagine that there is a space for expressing our ideas. In the General Assembly meeting, it's a situation. It's more democratization. It is more take and give with the world. And when it comes to our performance regarding a situation in our eastern border or with the what's happening in Africa, it's very important to have our words and our statements and our discourse heard for the entire world.
And Doctor, how do you see the reasons for demands for the reform of the UN Security Council?
Yes, because there is, as we already listened to our delegates in the Security Council talking about the misuse of the veto. And of course, the Security Council needs to be referred from several angles. One of that is supposed to have much more membership, much more democratization, and much more of an agenda that to restore the real, authentic international law.
And Doctor, what courts are available for Egypt to protect its water share?
Actually, Egypt is working very hard. We have seen the president move and the strategic actions, and also our diplomatic corps. All of these efforts are orchestrated to restore the international law. Egypt is doing that with persistence, with insistence, and I think there is successes there. And even we have listened to the General Secretary of the United Nations, Guterres, who mentioned the efforts by the President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi by name, and he said that he is doing a great job in de-escalating, in trying to get the international law operationalized, and Egypt is doing that with persistence, with insistence, and with strategic patience, and with great diplomatic continuous moves.
And of course, His Excellency Abdel-Ati reaffirmed Egypt's position that cooperation under international law is the only path to mutual benefit. How do you read the statement?
Yes, that statement, which is very compatible with the Egyptian role for restoring the international law, for abiding, getting everyone to abide by the international law. And what he mentioned regarding Ethiopia he really raised the issue of arbitration, especially, when negotiations came to a stop. Countries or parties are supposed to go to mediation and arbitration. So Egypt is that stage now. And Dr. Abdulati mentioned something very important, that if there are good intentions, they should accept mediation and arbitration because this is the only way out to abide also by the international law and not to violate it, as some parties insist to violate the international law, and their behavior should be stopped.
Well, Doctor, of course, His Excellency Abdulati said that the UN Security Council must undergo reforms to correct the historical injustice to the African continent. How do you elaborate on the historical injustice inflicted on Africa?
Yes, of course, there is a lot of historical interventions in the affairs of Africa. There are external powers that enhances sedition, enhances violation of the international law, and the whole thing needs complex diplomacy to pay attention to these issues inside Africa and inside the African states, who should rally behind one thing: to establish international law and to stand against foreign intervention that really causes this sedition and this division among the countries, because Africa is a place where we can say it is a basket of food for the entire world who suffer the severe economic crisis. So Africa could come to the vision, but with united effort and with abiding by the international law, of course.
And how would you list the most pressing African issues that need swift action?
Yes, actually the issue of the water. There is a problem when Egypt now is saying that Ethiopia is moving in a very unilateral way, and this is also a violation of the international law and the good relationship that Egypt cares about good relations with all African states. So I think that is very important to enhance communication all over the world, so as to restore the international law and also to enhance the relationship between the peoples of Africa, because there should be cooperation, there should be problem solving, and the problem solving needs cooperation among all parties in Africa and outside Africa. And Egypt is exerting the effort in that direction, and with great insistence and with great power to enhance communication and to enhance the restoration of the international law.
Well, Dr. Hassan Wagih, the Professor of Political Science, I would like to thank you so much also for commenting on this topic. And now, ladies and gentlemen, moving to another topic, which is the United Nations sounded alarm over the renewal of war in South Sudan. The UN rights chief said fears were intensifying that a 2018 peace deal, which ended a brutal 5-year civil war in South Sudan, was about to collapse. More in the following report.
UN High Commissioner for Human Rights Volker Turk in a statement said this is unconscionable and must stop. He said fears were intensifying that a 2018 peace deal, which ended a brutal 5-year civil war in South Sudan, was about to collapse and send the country back to all-out fighting. Turk said, quote, "I deeply worry for the plight of civilians in South Sudan," calling on the country's leaders and international community to do everything in their power to pull South Sudan from the brink. The statement said fighting has escalated sharply since March, with the army carrying out indiscriminate airstrikes in populated areas of Upper Nile, Jonglei, Unity, Central Equatorial and Warrap states. The statement said homes, schools and clinics have been destroyed, displacing thousands. Communal bloodshed has also spiked, with inter-clan and ethnic clashes in Warrap and Jonglei states, driving a 33% rise in civilian deaths. The UN reported at least 45 extrajudicial killings by security forces this year. Turk also pressed Juba to ensure due process in the trial of suspended First Vice President Riek Machar, who faces charges including treason and crimes against humanity over a March attack on a military base.
Now moving to another country, Guinea-Bissau is a West African nation with a population of around 2 million. Its coastal location presents opportunities to develop its fisheries sector, a cornerstone of its economy. In addition, it has the potential to develop tourism thanks to its biodiversity, cultural heritage, and historical sites. Let's take a closer look.
Guinea-Bissau was once part of the Kingdom of Kabu, as well as part of the Mali Empire. Parts of this kingdom persisted until the 18th century, while a few others had been under some rule by a Portuguese empire since the 16th century. In the 19th century, it was colonized as Portuguese Guinea. Upon independence declared in 1973 and recognized in 1974, the name of its capital, Bissau, was added to the country's name to prevent confusion with Guinea, formerly French Guinea. Guinea-Bissau has had a history of political instability since independence. The current president is Umaro Sissoko Embalo, who was elected on the 29th of December 2019. About 2% of the population speaks Portuguese, the official language, as a first language, and 33% speak it as a second language. Guinea-Bissau Creole, a Portuguese-based Creole, is the national language and also considered the language of unity. According to a 2012 study, 54% of the population speak Creole as a first language, and about 40% speak it as a second language. The nation is home to numerous followers of Islam, Christianity, and multiple traditional faiths. The country's per capita gross domestic product is one of the lowest in the world. Guinea-Bissau is a member of the UN-AU Economic Community of West African States, Organization of Islamic Cooperation, Community of Portuguese Language Countries, Organisation Internationale de la Francophonie, Alliance of Small Island States, and the South Atlantic Peace and Cooperation Zone. It was also a member of the now defunct Latin Union.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately we came to the end of this episode of Africa Today. Promise we'll be back tomorrow with more and diverse information about the African Horn. That was me, Wagih. Thank you for watching.